Hi, I'm Bob Hawk. I'm the Director of Sales here at WiSys, and I'm being joined today with my good friend, Nick Vassell. And Nick has been with our company a while. He's a Macola veteran. He's been around. He was instrumental in helping to create this product, so I've asked him to join me today to help add a little bit more information as to how MRP Plus will work with your Macola. Software provider for Macola. And we have applications that run on the desktop. We have applications that run on the scan gun and browser and things like that. So companies that use Macola many times are looking to increase their efficiency, automation, and just making Macola easier to use. And that's really what MRP Plus is going to do. It's part of our Agility suite that runs on the desktop, and it's built to work with Macola just right out of the box. So today you'll see it in action, working just the way it was designed. And really behind MRP Plus is the desire to take those old reports and make them disappear into the background. So we're going to use all the strength of Macola MRP Regen, but we're going to give you good visibility, eliminate all that lag time and paper stuff that you've got to do to wade through that information. So the applications work today with Macola ES and Macola 10, and not quite yet with progression. There are some specific menu calls in Agility MRP Plus that are related to calling Macola ES or 10 screens, and we're not calling progression screens. But big picture, MRP Plus is $6,000. Whether you have the modular solution or named user, you can add this to your system. It's an option. So MRP Plus will let you review, create, and release your purchase orders and work orders a lot more easily. Okay. And what is in MRP Plus? So I've highlighted some of the components that are in MRP Plus. The first big deal, we think, is the ability to manage your items and the setup. So you'll see in just a minute where we can look at the item master and the location master in one view and make changes individually to items or a mass change based on something that needs to be done. The regeneration process always happens with Macola first, and then there's an update regression that WiSys does. Really, it just refreshes our internal tables that are working with that MRP data. There's a safety stock grid. There's a dashboard that looks like this. There's also an exception grid. So those of you that live your life based on exceptions, I think you'll find this exceptional. And then there are two grids that deal with computer planned orders, one for purchased items and one for manufactured. Once you release or create an unreleased PO, we have a grid to change your POs to released and printed. Those of you that are using POP, there's grids for looking at your POP orders and releasing them, and also taking action with those. There's an option for shop order if you convert your shop orders all the way over from a computer plan shop order to generated to unreleased. Once you release those shop orders, you can then print them if you want to print something. There's an MRP reorder advice grid, and then the MRP by date grid seems to be everybody's favorite, so we'll spend some time there. And then there's also some forecasting. All right, that's the setup. Now let's get into the product. All right, I have the Agility screen open, and there is a whole new section here called MRP Plus. If you look down here, you'd see MRP Plus when you add it. So let's go right into the system here. And it's really built, the menu is built, Nick built the menu so that it just basically, you just fall down the menu and do the things in the order that you'd naturally do them. So with a grid, if you've not been familiar with an Agility grid, the Agility software, I should say this, is not a separate app really from the Macola data. There is no Agility database and a Macola database. When you're working and looking at items, you're looking at the real Macola data. Many times when we open a grid, there's the ability to filter a grid. So I can filter based on my buyer planner ID or a P&IC code. I'm going to select everything. So here is the open grid. If you've never used a grid before, you can come in and sort with a grid. You can put summarized totals. You can group things based like that, things like that. And then these columns that are bold and opened up, you can actually do input here. So if I wanted to come in here and change this item to vendor 200, I can do that. If I wanted to add lead time, 14 days, I can do that. When I make that change, you'll notice anytime I touch a row, it's going to check a box. It means nothing has happened until you update. So if I update 10 items and leave the screen without updating, nothing really happened. So if I click update, it goes out and updates the database with these changes. So for those of you that spend your life in and out of Macola screens, I think you'll quickly see that you can do something rather unique here. And there's quite a few fields that are opened up if I just scroll across.
So, Bob,
yeah,
basically, for everyone listening, the fields that we had decided to put into this grid are really every field you would need to be able to configure your MRP. So whether that grid, so the way Exact originally wrote it, or Macola wrote it, some of these fields lived in the item location table, others lived in the item master table. So we decided that this should be just one consolidated grid, so you could just go to one spot and everything you needed was right here.
and if you notice, there is a greater than or less than sign on each field. So if you're looking at this, you can see that this field is coming from the location master, and this is the default location on the item in Macola. So here's your product category, descriptions, but as you move further to the right, unless you rearrange the fields, you'll see things start to switch. So here, reorder levels, these are the fields that are coming out of the location master. All right, you've seen me make a change. Let's make a different change. Let's come in here and filter for just vendor 100. And let's say that everything for vendor 100 needs to do a mass change. So I can come in here. I'm going to do a mass change. And I want to pick the field. And I'll come down to reorder planning lead time.
Planning time. There you go.
Planning time.
Yep.
And if I tab down, I'm going to go from 0 and everything's going to be 14 days. And I'm going to make that change for vendor 100. So the supply chain's been kind of crazy. Maybe your suppliers are telling you certain things that you need to pay attention to. So that's the gist of this grid. Those of you that do maintenance and keep up with your items, I hope you'd find this would make your life a little easier.
I would mention also that in this case, Bob just chose to show you that we could make a mass change to an entire vendor, but we could filter that further if it was just a certain product line or a certain PI&C code. However, you could use all of the filtering capabilities and further refine this group before you changed it. And anecdotally, we've heard from clients that COVID and other changes in supply chain, it's really made the MRP process more onerous, simply because all of the data that they have accumulated over their years historically no longer applies. And sometimes you're talking about clients with thousands and thousands of item numbers, and they don't have the time to go in there and update all this information. So therefore their material plans are no longer accurate. So, you could literally come in here, make this change, and then if the next day your vendor called and said, well, we've got another delay and our planning lead times have changed again, you could come back in here and make another change. And you don't have to have that resistance, so that you can make certain your material plan is actually a tool that you can use rather than having to always sort of eyeball it.
That's good. Well, let's keep going here. I'm going to close this component, and I'm going to open the regen process. Now, this is a very simple screen. The purpose of this screen is to, number one, know if your regeneration is happening right now. And this would say yes. You'll see it do that in just a minute. And once it's done, I can come in and just refresh the WiSys data. It's quite fast. So let's start a regen. I know all of you that run MRP will be envious of how fast my machine is. All right, here we go. Come back here. And each screen has a refresh. So you can see regen is running right now. So I can keep an eye on that, what's happening. Minimize this, and regen should be done. Nice to live in the demo world, isn't it? Okay, if I refresh this again, it shows no. Now that I've done that, I just push this button, and you have a very quick refresh of the WiSys work tables for MRP. That's all there is to this. It's people that I've shown the product to and are starting to use it. It's easy to forget to do this, and then you don't have the data that you want, but once you do it a couple times, you'll remember. All right, safety stock. So whenever you run a Macola regen, you're going to get, Macola recommendations for safety stock, and then WiSys is going to display the what we think safety stock should be. Here's the formula up here that we've used to generate this. So this is your current safety stock number, and this is what WiSys thinks. Now, because this is an open field, I could come in here and change this number. Again, when I step off the field, it says it needs to be updated, and I can update my safety stock number. That's really all there is to this grid. Again, you could focus on one warehouse or multiple warehouses, that sort of thing. Nick, anything else you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, only that you don't have to hit update after each calc. So you could have updated. Yeah, you could have done a bunch and hit one update. And the second thing is, if you're not familiar with our WiSys grids, if you don't like our suggested safety stock formula, you could easily just insert another column and put your own formula in. And then from there, you wouldn't be able to update. You need some tailoring in order to be able to use that column to update, but it would at least do the calculation for you, and then you could copy those over to this suggested safety stock column and update it with your numbers.
Good point. Okay. I started with a picture of the dashboard. It seems like everybody these days wants some kind of an analytic. So there's data here on these grids. I guess the important thing is the Agility application comes with an analytic designer, and you can build your own analytics so that you can see what you want to see and not necessarily what we think is important. Okay, we're going to take a look at the console. When we use the word console, console is like a place for the power user. And we change the menu here up at the top. So there's lots of things you can do. So as you touch different items, as you walk down through here, here's a manufactured item. You can see here that there's things you can see by manufactured, pop, things like that. You could look at pegging. Where's demand coming from for this item?
Hey, Bob, I don't know if it's you or me, but I'm not seeing your screen updates.
Okay, thank you for saying so. Let's see, how do I stop sharing?
There we go.
Reshare.
I'm seeing. Yeah.
Okay. A little bit of a lag time. Can you see me moving my mouse around now, Nick?
Yeah, sure can.
Okay. So as I said, as you touch different items, these buttons up on top will respond. So if I come down here to a shop floor item, the shop floor button is hot. And you can then drill down and see what shop orders you have. So this is really, for the power user. If you sit here, you can go open exceptions and things like that and see that here. The exception grid, for those of you that live and breathe by exceptions, there's a lot of people that like that. This is the normal Macola exception report, and then we've added some color coding based on, agility, thoughts behind agility. What does that mean? Like, date change required. So it's telling you a little bit, you might want to come over here and make a date change. Here's a quantity change, things like that. Now, down at the bottom, these are all the items in my inventory. How about we just focus on some items called ABC? All right, this is the ABC of the grid. And so I've taken the time to build an item. It's a very complicated item. An ABC is made up of an A, a B, and a C. So you can see here that A, B, and C are just purchased items, and the ABC is a shop floor item. So we'll look at that as we go through here. Let's come down to the exception grid that I tried to type on a second ago. Now here are my exceptions for ABC. So now it's giving me the words to these codes, which is true with the setup codes also in the beginning. We spelled them all out so you don't have to remember them all. And here's your A and your B, ABC items. And you can see the different, here's unreleased purchase orders, things like that. You could come in here and make date changes. So really some of the power begins to show up here. If I wanted to convert and release and print a purchase order, I could do so right here. And it'll go out there and do that. So that 8085 purchase order, you can see its status is now printed. And if you wanted to have it printed out, it would print on your printer. Or if you wanted to email it to a vendor, you can set up Agility to do email also. So that's kind of a power function here. The ability to change something. I could take an item here, and there's the ability to do, let's say, a shop order. This one, released, unreleased. here's where you can take a generated shop order and make it released, unreleased shop order. So you see here it's a CP right now. I'd first probably convert it to an unreleased, I'd change it to a generated shop order, and then I'd use this other icon to move it along. I'm going to do that a little later. For those of you that work with exceptions, this is the place where you might want to work. After we look at exceptions, we've divided down, if you look here, we have computer planned manufacturing orders and computer planned purchasing. So really this is just a grid. They're the same grids, but they're just focused on, like this one is just focused on the manufacturing type orders. And here, again, I can filter and sort based on what I want to do. Again, there's the option here to come in and convert multiple CPs if I want. I could come in here and just convert multiple CPs.
And if we haven't made it clear, whatever filtering that we use on the grid, if we simply click that checkbox in the upper left-hand corner, it'll select all the records. So you don't even have to select them one at a time as we've been doing.
So if I wanted to do all these items, and if I want to accept the recommendations, that's another thing. So as you move through your MRP life and you get things set up, really the goal is to be able to trust these two grids, the manufacturing grid and the purchasing grid. Once you believe your setup works for you, you're getting the results you want, you can start to go faster just by accepting the results off this grid. Okay. And same's true for purchasing. If I open the purchasing grid up, again, filter, respond, and now I can look at all these are all CPs again, and I can begin to, check off things that I might want to convert to actual unreleased POs. Now we did have a minute ago, I did create an unreleased PO, or I think I created a PO that was released actually. These are all my POs now that have been released or unreleased. You can see here I can focus on unreleased and then check a box. And if I want to make a change to the data, I would make the change here, hit update, and then if I want to release this order, I can release it. And now it's released.
So the reason that Bob switched grids like that on us is because once we convert anything from one of these mass process grids, those are only our computer planned orders. Those are the things that MRP has crunched the numbers and determined that we need to plug the hole. Once we convert those, they drop off those grids. So if we want to work with them anymore, we have to go to a different grid. Now, one of the very big benefits that we have using the WiSys MRP Plus module is that unlike the Macola module, we went to the extra step where if you change the status of a document from a computer planned order, which as we all know is a bit of just a planning document, it's a figment of our imagination, so to speak, until we actually turn it into a live breathing document. So we've gone to that extra step here is once you've converted that CP order, you've hit that convert button. Macola would require you to do a full regen, which for some organizations could take an hour, who knows. But in our version of it, we actually will create that document for you live. You just have to hit the little refresh button up in the little green refresh button at the top of your tab, and you'll see the status of that document change to an unreleased order rather than disappearing.
Okay. Thank you, Nick.
Of course.
So when, some people work with exceptions, some people look at these two grids. from a reporting standpoint and believe that. There's the purchasing option that I showed you here, the purchase order release grid. There's also a POP grid for those of you that are doing POP. And I may not have my filter set up correctly. And let's see if I get data back. There we go. So once I cleared those filters and brought the data back, now I'm dealing with POP orders. And again, I can take a POP order from released or unreleased. There's a document that we print for POP orders. So you can actually have a material pick list or a work order to deliver to your floor if you want the paper. But you can see here I've got different released, unreleased stuff. And depending on what I want to do here, I can print release, or I could even edit the BOM if I need to do that. That's all built in to this grid. Shop orders is somewhat similar. These are my shop orders. And I'll come in here and look at this one. And I'll get a material pick list that goes along with this shop order. These are crystal documents. If you want to embed crystal documents into this, there's a way to do that. And everybody has different documents they need for different people. So that's something to talk about. On different work orders may need different documents and pages to be remembered as they print off. So that's printing. Now we're going to go down to MRP by date. This may be another grid that you want to work on. And this MRP by date is really,
This is the by period one. We have a date.
I'm sorry.
The by period. Yep.
These are your periods. And if I do 2023, you can see that I have some current data in the system. And this is giving me my requirements by period. Anything else that would be helpful about this, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just want to know that this is a, first of all, there is a Macola report that's the equivalent to this. And this is really just meant as an alternative to it. There's no work that really can be done from this grid, but it does show you you can use your filters and you can look at that net inventory column towards the end there. If you were to filter that by negatives, you would be able to quickly see for which periods any of your items needed work. Select all and then don't select 0 or don't select, you could even do an advanced filter. However, but the point is that you can easily get this thing down to just those items for those periods that are actionable, and have that list. You can export the list once you were done if you needed to, but it's not meant as a grid that's it's really more of a reporting grid than a grid that has anything that you're going to perform on it.
All right. Thank you. And there's a reorder advice grid. Some of you may like that reorder advice. It's telling you items, recommended reorders. Here's your color coding for you. And then again, you can come in and change the numbers and the vendor as you want to move through this. And
I believe one of the advantages to this grid is I believe if you select different items and it has the same vendor, it's going to create a single purchase order for you. I think this grid works that way.
So you're saying if I go to vendor 100?
I don't think it's going to create 2 purchase orders.
Okay. So here you could check that box and create a purchase order for all these items. Or you could come down and select just the ones you want. And you probably should.
And of course, you can change the quantities also.
Yep. And this is 21. So there it is. It created 80, 89. Okay. Now I think the heart of the matter comes down here to the MRP by date grid. And let me just get rid of this. And now I have all my items and it's showing me, now this is really the look at everything all at once. If you've done any work already, it's going to be reflected in this, especially if you've got this open, you can always hit this refresh icon up here and get your data refreshed. So in this case, if you want to convert something, come in here and take this computer planned order and convert it to 119. And you can see here's 119 now that's been plugged into that. And if I come back and select it again, or actually I'll just call this screen.
Well, we can see also, Bob, that it's not a it went from a C, maybe you already pointed this out, but it switched. If we keep an eye on it, it switched from a CP order to an unreleased shop order, which of course is the piece that we do that Macola can't do on the fly.
And then we'll come down here. And just do that. And it created that order. And I haven't created a routing for it, so I would do that manually. So there's my order. And okay. So is this, Nick, is this still showing the code that's in the MRP file?
Yes. So
That won't change until you regen again, correct?
well, if you release it, it should change.
Let me just do that. I think I've already done that. All right. Well, there's a way to do that.
Click the refresh button up on the top and see if that changes.
No.
Whatever the status in that MRP regen file is, it should show. So however that document is showing it, it should reflect it.
Okay. Always more to learn. Now, once you are comfortable and you've done some execution here, if those of you that are running master scheduling, there is a grid for master schedule. So these are current orders in the master schedule. And then if you want to add another one, you do it right here. There's a component. This is where you can now add another forecast if you want to do that. So this is a place where you can do some data entry for future orders that you might need to take in consideration of. There's another button down here, Nick. Can you remind me what this one does? Merges your...
Sure, that's the merge master schedule button. And for those customers we have, that's going to bring up a Macola screen that folks that use master scheduling will be very familiar with this screen. And what you would do is run this process after you've run your regen, and this is going to pull in the very orders that you're changing here that you can see listed. Is going to pull those in with those due dates and include them in your material plan. So it's just a convenient spot to have this linkage to this Macola screen since we're changing these, adding.
Thank you very much for your attendance today, and we'll have a recording of this that'll be distributed. Nick, thanks for pitching in. Appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Bob. Take care, everybody.